Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here as a few more people trickle in. Thank you for joining us. I'm Scott Coughlin, manager publisher of EM for Fish. Editorial assistant Kimberly Deep is running the tech behind the scenes today. Just a little setup here for this webinar. Today's conversation is slated to run 75 minutes until 4:45 Eastern. This will be a PowerPoint-free webinar and not a formal moderated panel. It's intended as an opportunity for you to hear from and engage with very well-informed fishermen, and in one case, a vessel owner-manager who has a fisherman's perspective about the current state of EM in a few US regions. And we'd like you to participate, so please type your questions for our guests in the chat function as we go along. Our hope is that this conversation will lead to others and perhaps assist fishermen in other regions, both nationally and possibly globally, as they consider how EM might improve their own management systems and how they might go about setting it up. We'll record this webinar and post it in the EM for Fish resource library within 24 hours or so. So if you know people who might find it interesting but weren't able to be here, please refer them to the website. Pretty simple agenda today. First, I'll provide brief intros of our panelists, then we'll go around the circle to hear from each of them for about 5 to 8 minutes to baseline us about their particular fisheries and their experience to date with EM, with a look at what's working, what isn't, and lessons learned so far as they see them in their regions. That will flow into an open discussion touching on, among other things, I'm sure, imperatives of trust and flexibility in EM program development, especially perhaps in the age of COVID, identifying and engaging with fishermen who can make a difference, and what it might look like to build a shared vision of EM from the wheelhouse up. That open discussion will in turn flow into questions for the panelists from all of you. If you do submit a question, please specify if it's for a specific person or the group as a whole. That's the progression we anticipate. Now let me tell you a little about these people in the order in which you'll hear them today. Dan Falvey, Longline for black cod in Southeast Alaska. When he's not on the water, he acts as a project coordinator for the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association, or ALPHA. He's extensively involved in ALPHA's advocacy and research efforts and is a past recipient of National Fisherman Magazine's Highliner of the Year Award. Really happy to have you here, Dan. Paul Cuella operates the 54-foot Cape Windy, a groundfish trawler out of Warrenton, Oregon. And for those of you who don't know, the West Coast, that means Paul routinely crosses the Columbia River Bar on his way to and from the fishing grounds. That stretch of ocean has claimed over 2,000 vessels since we started keeping track of these things in the late 1700s. So Paul has my undying respect. He was pointing out just before we started the webinar that the weather is nice 90% of the time. So and I thought, well, so it only leaves 10% of the time when it's horrible. Anyway, he has my respect. When he's not fishing, Paul serves on the Oregon Trawl Commission and is an active member of the Pacific Fishery Management Council's Groundfish EM Program Advisory Committee. Lisa Schmidt was a surgical charge nurse for over 30 years, managing surgeons, staff, and operating rooms in Tampa, Florida. Following the death of her husband, John, in 2015, she took the wheel of the company he had established and currently manages 3 longline boats out of Madeira Beach, Florida. Lisa is a board member of the Gulf of Mexico Reef Fish Shareholders Alliance, as well as Gulf Wild, and sits on the planning team from the Young Fishermen's Development Act, as well as the National Marine Fisheries Service, Red Grouper, and Tilefish Advisory Panel. Rounding out the group, excuse me, last but not least, Chris Brown is a lifelong fisherman out of Point Judith, Rhode Island, president of the Rhode Island Commercial Fishermen's Association, a board member and former president of the Seafood Harvesters of America, and a longtime advocate for accountability in both fishing practices and fisheries management. I might add that he has the scars to prove it. So thank you all again for being here. Now let me get out of the way and we can start things off by hearing from Dan about his experiences in Alaska.
Am I muted or can you hear me?
Now we got you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I thought I'd just start by talking a little bit about what the longline fleet in Alaska looks like. So in Alaska, we have in round numbers about 1,000 boats that fish for the longline species in any given year. About 100 of them, maybe a little bit more, are over 60 feet long. There's about 500 in this middle group between 40 feet and 60 feet long. And then there's another 400 boats that are small, under 40 feet long. And they fish for blackcod, halibut, and Pacific cod primarily. And so previously, Alaska's observer program for the longline fleet was focused on the over 60-foot boats, those big 100 larger boats. And that's because they catch a lot of the fish, and they're also big enough to accommodate an extra person on board. But then in 2013, Alaska restructured our observer program so that everybody pays a fee of 1.65 now, or whatever their ex-vessel gross is. And NMFS has the authority to randomly assign an observer on any longline boat down to 40 feet. So it basically opened up those 500 boats between 60 and 40 feet to having to carry observers out there. And so a lot of us in the fishery know that these boats are pretty small, and the living accommodations on them often can't handle another person on there. They're just bunk space limited. And trying to shoehorn that extra person in is probably going to change the way that boat fishes and be an imposition on it. So we started experimenting with electronic monitoring in 2010. We got a NIFWIF grant to just put some cameras out on 12 boats, I think it was, start getting the footage back, see where the cameras need to be mounted, see what the logistics look like to build these systems. And the goal was to have an EM option for these smaller boats when the program was restructured in 2013. However, at the last minute, the agency, NMFS, decided that they couldn't restructure the program and develop an EM program at the same time. And so we didn't have an EM option in 2013. And that caused a lot of tension between the fishing industry and NMFS, to put it mildly. And so the way we moved forward was our council created an electronic monitoring working group that had members of the industry, myself and some of the other ones, EM service providers, and the key agency personnel at NMFS sitting down in a room. And we were almost meeting on a monthly basis at first to try and figure out how we could put an EM option on the water. So again, at first we just started with, I think it was 7 boats to carry systems and just get the program going. We were very fortunate that Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission kind of came in as a neutral third party and said, hey, we're doing EM review for the West Coast boats. And having them do the review from an unbiased perspective really helped advance the program. And so over the years in 2014 and 15, we just tested the EM systems, slowly grew the fleet. I think we went from 7 to 14 to 30, and then up to 70, 140, and we currently have 169 of those 500 boats carrying cameras now. We just slowly grew the program. It went into regulation, so it's an officially regulated program starting in 2018, I believe. And I think it's one of the 2 or 3 in the program that in the country that are in regulation. So as far as what worked and what didn't work, having that EM committee where you could just sit down with the providers, the fishermen, and the managers in a hands-on way and just, solve the problems that needed to be solved was just critical. To be able to get down into the details of what data is needed, how to best get it off a boat, where to put the cameras if they don't interfere with the crew. That's what got us moving forward. And I still think that's a critical part of trying to evolve and maintain these programs. I think the second thing that really helped us move forward is that we took the time to socialize the fleet to EM. I mean, you just put it on a few boats, they let them try it out. They're going to talk to their buddies. Their buddies are going to walk over and say, hey, what's that thing hanging on your boat? How's it working for you? And you just let word of mouth get the fleet comfortable with this new technology. It was another thing that really helped us. And it's not just the fishing fleet that has to be socialized to EM. I mean, we found that it was the scientists and the fishery managers really need to get socialized to EM too, because in 2013, they clearly said, this won't meet our data needs. We can't make this work. And here we are now, 5, 6 years later, and we've got 169 boats carrying those systems. So we had to work with the agency to get them to really think through what are the objectives for at-sea monitoring, what is the information we need, and what can we live with. And so that was really critical. And I think that's that kind of brings me to the last thing that really helped us out, which is really clearly identifying what is the objective that we're putting these cameras on the boat for. Because EM systems can't replace an observer. They can't get everything. They can't get biological samples. It's really hard to get lengths with the camera by itself unless people put fish on a measuring board. So you really got to say, what is the information we need from this section of the fleet, and how can we use cameras to most efficiently get it? I think I'll just stop there because that's kind of set the stage for what worked and what didn't in Alaska, and turn it over to Paul on the West Coast.
Hi, well, good afternoon, guys. So I guess I come from a little bit different perspective. I don't currently have a fully functional EM on board. We are still testing stuff. In fact, the trawl fishery doesn't have a program that's actually gone into regs yet. So if I back up a bit, so West Coast trawl fishery, there's kind of two different parts as far as EM is concerned, and that is the whiting and midwater fishing, which is the lower hanging fruit as far as EM is concerned, and that's because it's full retention or very close to full retention. So therefore the cameras are just verifying that nothing's getting dumped over, that everybody's whatever, and then if any kind of operational discards take place, then they're there to estimate that or verify that what the crew estimates. The groundfish side, which is more of the flatfishes and stuff like that, is what I fish primarily. And so both sides went into an ITQ back in 2011, which was individual transferable quotas. And with that, we all had started taking observers 100% of the time for the catch accountability. So we take 100% of the time, we pay all of it. It's for onboard observer, human observers, about, what is it, $570 a day right now. So it's a considerable cost. So the groundfish side of things, the flatfish is multi-species, fairly large volumes, relatively small fish of many different species and many different sizes. So all those things are they're all big hurdles as far as being able to capture stuff with EM and estimate, especially when you do have to discard the non-marketable fish. Undersized fish will get some species that there's no market for, or even the species that we do sell, you'll get undersized ones, a portion of them, and you have to be able to discard those at sea. So that makes it really tough for an observer or an electronic monitor system. So right now, the observers, though, the good news is that a lot of the stuff we catch and that we are discarding, there's no biological concern with it. I mean, we're only catching 10, 20% of the ACL of many of these species. So I look at that as a big positive, because I feel like there should be a margin of error in there that's acceptable by the agency and by everybody, that, like, okay, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe we're not, estimating these to the exact pound, but, it's not a problem. And so I think that's one of the positives that we have going forward. But anyway, so to go back to kind of what we've done in the past, we started personally, we put some cameras on in maybe 13 or 12 or 2012, 13, and that was for halibut studies. And those studied the correlation between time on deck of halibut and the viability of that halibut to survive, because they all are, we let all the halibut go that we catch, and we get counted for it. But the key is to try to let it go alive, or as alive, so it has the best chance of living as possible. So we use cameras to verify that the longer they were on deck, the worse the survivability was, and how that could be quantified. Okay, so that moved forward. We ended up putting conveyor belts on the boat, and that was to control the flow of the product underneath the camera, for whether it's a human that's going to be reviewing the footage or a computer or whatever, to be be able to control the flow of what the camera is seeing, so we could actually, somebody could speciate and estimate sizes, which correlates with the weight. So we're still doing that. And the hurdles, you know, we've got, basically it takes too long for a human to look at all this stuff and try to figure out what's going under the belt. Somehow you think it would be easier or cheaper to have somebody at home looking at it, but that's not the case. It ends up being cheaper to have somebody ride around with you on the ocean and do it. So we're still doing that with some success, but you know, we're not all the way there yet. What we hope to get going forward is some more cooperation with the council, NIMPs, and the buy-in from them also, that, you know, the human observer is not perfect either. They take samples and extrapolate it out to come up with their overall numbers of discards. And I'm hoping that there's a way that we can get them to buy in on the fact that, you know, if we just review certain percentages of it, then that's going to be okay. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And considering that these are not, there's not a biological problem with any of these things, we could be off by 300% and it's not going to be a problem biologically. So, you know, we need an option that's cheaper, is the main thing, cheaper than the $5.75 a day. And, you know, we're hoping this will help. The one thing, something what we've learned while putting the other into regulations, more the whiting side, which is, like I said, the low-hanging fruit, the full retention side of things, is how the actual regs are written determines massively what the cost is. And that goes down to storage times, the amount of review, the amount of audit on that review, and of course, who's doing it. So all those things can make it a deal breaker, really, in my mind, because they'll end up driving the cost, or they can drive the cost higher than a human observer. So that's one of the things that, like I said, we're still dealing with. But that's one of the things that you might not think of early on in the program. I didn't think. You think, oh, well, it's got to be cheaper. It's, you know, it's just the cameras watching it. You know, nobody has to sit there and ride around on the boat. But not always the case. Anyway, some of the other things are, we have a relatively small fleet of people that just ground fish, and, you know, 75 boats plus or minus, maybe even left that are left doing it. So that ends up being a big problem, because for the technology providers, they'd like to see a bigger group of people so that they could get some economies of scale once something gets figured out. But there's not a huge payoff, because there's not a whole bunch of boats to sell it to in the end. So that's another thing that's a problem. But we're dealing with all of those. And I guess to wrap it up here, or the only thing I can think of is, if you're going to start doing, you know, stuff like this, you need partners, and whether it's NGOs, environmental groups, specific states. And you need grants, and you need EM providers that are willing to work with you, because it is a long process, and yeah, it takes a lot of time. Well, I guess I'll leave it with that, and of course answer questions later. But Lisa, do you want to go ahead?
Okay. So I'm Lisa Schmidt, and I own 3 commercial longline vessels out of Madeira Beach, Florida. And had to take over this business when my husband passed away, so I had to learn pretty quickly. Carol Nydig from Moat Marine had approached my husband about the cameras on board for bycatch accountability and shark depredation. And so when she finally approached me, when she realized I was keeping the fleet and learning about it, I agreed. Science is my background too. And it has been a good, positive experience. I believe in the idealistic world of scientists and fishermen working together in a positive way. And Carol has made that happen. She has one full-time employee, Max Lee, who was an observer, and the rest of her program is volunteers. The cameras are saltwater ink cameras, and when they were installed, they engage in the captain and where they're going to install them so that they won't be in the way. The volunteers come and pick up the hard drives, and then they go review the hard drives. And it's been a positive experience because of how they treat the fishermen with respect and engage with them and give them the data, the follow-up. The data is for stock assessment.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna interrupt you for just a second. I think we might have some children's noises in the background on one of the, Paul. Thanks. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay. The data is for basically scamp, red grouper, greater amberjack, gag grouper, and shark depredation. And they're continually working on programs to get the data also back to the fishermen, because right now they send out reports on the type of species that they're catching, how much, the areas, and they've got a new camera they're putting on the boats that is underwater, that now they can tell the species of the shark better, because it's kind of hard when the fishermen are cutting the lines off from the cameras up on top. And so for me, it's been a really good experience, and my captains enjoy it. And I think that, you know, for the captains, the challenges is getting people the privacy problem, you know, and it isn't beneficial to the captains unless they believe in the sustainability of the fishery. So there are some challenges, and it is a volunteer program. I think the goal, if NOAA, and I know a lot of NOAA people are watching this or listening, it would be beneficial to get an advisory panel and a planning committee with fishermen and scientists on it to collaborate to make it successful, if that's what they're pushing for, because of the shortage of the observers. So I will give it to Chris.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Kimberly, for putting this together for us. Hopefully we can get to what resembles consensus enough about some of the important features of this program to the industry, so we can get more people on board with it. My fishery is a multi-species, small volume fishery in southern New England. We fish from 10 to 30 miles offshore. The way it works for us is all the species that are to be retained are placed in baskets, and the species that are to be discarded, species of concern, hake species, unwanted flatfish species, juvenile species that we retain that are undersized. We retain them, and then we've gotten to a point now where we show the camera how far up in a basket the fish are, trying to get weights. That's the newest thing we've done. Up until then, we have had to pass everything over a Jamaica board, you know, a white, red, and green, black striped board, and the camera would pick up the lengths as we discarded the individual fish. It's a little bit of work. You know, it's a little more work, but it's worth it if you get something out of it. So we've been doing that. This is going to be my third winter doing it. It's been good. You know, I don't know why it is, but everything on the East Coast seems to have to be harder. it seems to be something that is more challenged or difficult or have greater obstacles to overcome. And this initiative was born into that sort of an environment. I think when they finally dragged Carlos Rafael up the dock, 5 minutes later, they dragged the first cameras down the dock and tried to put them on fishing boats. The perspective was immediately that it was an enforcement initiative. And it really isn't. It shouldn't be viewed that way, but there was not a whole lot of educational energy put into the space by NOAA to make anyone think that it was anything but. You know, and like, as the saying goes, the first time someone tells you who they are, you're smart if you believe them. So it wasn't well received. The program I'm in is it's experimental. We have yet to find a home for our data. So we're measuring a lot of fish. Every trip, upon the conclusion of the trip, we submit the video and the electronic VTR, and they review one versus the other. They grade our handling of fish. Fishermen don't handle fish instinctively as if they are performing for an audience of a camera over their head. Their instincts are to pick it up, manhandle it, throw it, chuck it, toss it, kick it, whatever it takes to get it in the basket, get it in the hole, and get off deck. So we've had to retrain ourselves. This is an entirely new culture for us. You know, it's admittedly, it is, after handling fish since I was a small boy, to be corrected at the end of every trip, maybe not the best thing going, you know what I mean? It kind of rubs you the wrong way. You're a little tired, a little hungry. Haven't had soothing adult beverage yet when you get in, and there's your envelope from the people who reviewed you, who are good people, I assure you, but they have a rough job convincing me I did something wrong. For an example of that would be when you're hauling and setting, the fish will fall onto the deck under the stern ramp, right by the stern ramp. And our instincts are to immediately kick it overboard just so you don't trip on the damn thing or slide down the ramp on it or what have you. It's a safety issue. And those seem to be the fish that they are most worried about, things of that nature. We handle 99% of the fish flawlessly. We satisfy the reviewers, but there are always examples like that drive you crazy. We got off to a little bit of a wonky start. You know, when the camera systems first came down the dock, we were using a fairly simple system, and NOAA was having these elaborate dreams of the Science Center about cameras that could do all kinds of things. They could determine weight and lengths and species at high speed on our conveyor belts and all of that. And really, it was what it amounted to was the entrenchment of two camps, those who didn't want to change and those who wanted to change too fast. Scare a fisherman and good luck catching them again. And that's what a lot of the talk did about these super sophisticated and expensive systems. And then, you know, I can only interpret the wonky crowd being in such great favor of rapid, unchecked development that it amounted to almost an educated resistance, effectively, on the rest of the fleet. So we got off to a rough start. I think over the course of my 2 winters doing this, we have answered a lot of questions with the guys. But in all honesty, there have not been any economic incentives to get in. We were still having human observers paid for you at a small rate. Only recently has the council agreed to go to higher levels of coverage. So I think now is the time for us to rapture around concepts and reasonable costs and storage and all of those things that will make this more acceptable. You know, more acceptable to the average fisherman. we're going to get there, but it's been kind of choppy. It's been kind of hard. One thing I will say is they have been incredibly durable. One of the fears that all the guys have is that they're not going to go fishing if the camera system doesn't work. Well, I haven't found that to be the case, not even a single day. These things have been incredibly durable. I have more observers that can't make the boat than I have cameras that don't show up and work every day. So that's been good. Personally, I would much rather have a camera overhead than an observer underfoot. I have a 44-foot boat, and when you take an observer who is trouble standing up, and they reason it's a good time to spread every basket you own out and put 2 fish in each one, frankly, that just pisses me off. I don't know how else to say it. Drives you crazy. These cameras don't do that. We get the job done. We're working on our technique. We're spreading the word to the fishery. And, you know, one thing that's incredibly important is that you need to have a good support team behind you. Given that this is a project we're on, I have access to, you know, technical advice all the time. In the beginning of it, thank God I did. I got a good memory. It's just short. So started up one day, get down, everything's fine. Go fishing a week later, and oh crap, you know. You make a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning and figure something out. So they were great. We've come through it, and that's going to be an important component to get more people on board. I think it's a lot of work. There's a lot of faith. And I understand the importance of accountability in our fisheries. It's the quickest way to grow the pie, and that's what we have to get to. We cannot allow poor reporting to be the source of diminished access. We have the right to get access to you know, all the fish that the law allows, and we have to do what we have to on our side to make sure that we do have access to it. Up until now, we have not. You know, it's not all hard work and struggle. There are some humorous times, some light times. I'll just share a brief story with you. I had a green observer on the boat one time when we had the cameras for a little while, and I think he'd only been out a couple of days. He didn't even notice that we had cameras. So as the green observers always do, when they have to relieve themselves, they ask for permission. I said, "Cap, okay if I go out and take a leak?" I said, "Yeah, probably a good idea. Not going to work out if you don't, so you better go out there." So we went out and he took a pee right in front of the camera. We were laughing a little bit. A few hours later, we went out and he did it again. He didn't ask this time. He just went out and did it. And then it started to occur to me that this wasn't going to be good in the long run, so I had to intervene. I came in and I said, "Hey, son, you know, next time you pee, you might want to go off to the side. You know, we got cameras and you're being monitored." And the contract I signed said that if that camera sees it, I got to grab it and slap it across the Jamaica board and measure that thing. And that's not going to be any good for either one of us. So maybe next time you go off to the side there a little bit. So it's like I said, there's some hard work and some struggle, but there's a few laughs in there too. I guess I'll just sign off now, Scott. Go ahead.
Can I say something?
Hi, Lisa.
Well, I agree with you, Scott. For it to work, it's really about communication, education to the fishermen, and the approach. And it should be something beneficial to the fishermen if they're carrying the cameras on board. There should be some benefits to it. If it's going to become like an enforcement or a regulatory tool, it's not going to work. So I think that's why when they implement it or moving towards implementation, you know, they engage the fishermen and make it a collaborative approach. I'm done.
I'm working with Kim on some technical glitches right here, right now. But I'd be interested in hearing, Dan, what your reflections, some of the compare and contrast on some of the elaborate dreams that people had in Alaska, as Chris called them, as opposed to where you ended up, and how that how that history worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a universal problem to all areas that are working on EM. From what I just heard in this go around is, back in 2013, one of the reasons they didn't have the EM program is because they wanted to try out, stereo cameras that can get length automatically as the fish clears the rail, instead of just what everybody else was using, which is, a camera that you count the pieces and you put an average weight to it. And, that was all new technology, and they ended up trying to, invent those. They still haven't quite got that perfected, and it's been 7 years now. But, we've got a good program with the current cameras that do piece counts and average weights, that's working. And so I think that idea of, do we really need a Porsche when actually a Chevy will get us across the finish line is a common theme. And it's one of those things you just got to go back to the agency and get the right people in the room to solve those problems is kind of what I was thinking. And then I also heard the theme about wanting an advisory panel. You do really need, to have one of those working groups where you get the providers, the fishermen, and the scientists in the room, and the managers, and just make it work. And it's really important to get the right people in the room. When we first had that EM work group, when things were so tense, it was really just about trying to strangle each other. But you got some of the folks on the agency side who just weren't going to make progress out of the room, and you got some people that could help move it along in the room, and you made progress. So I think those are two of the themes I really heard loud and clear that, go around the country.
Yeah, I noticed that myself. Hey, I might as well jump into a question here that just came across from Bill Karp. It says, I know Dan and Chris recognize the importance of accountability, and perhaps the other panelists as well. Uptake of EM will depend to some extent on increasing acceptance of the importance of accountability. So how do the panelists think this can be done?
Yeah, let me jump in, Scott. I think there needs to be an educational component, not just at things like MRAP, but in general, at the councils. The simple math associated with showing more discards has it revealed the stock may ultimately be in better shape over the course of time. No discard speaks, poorly to the abundance. A lot of guys don't understand that. They believe that every discard takes them one fish away from landings. And the reality is just the opposite. Over the course of time, I've had a few marine biologists explain to me, the correlation between reporting and the perceptions of abundance. And we have to knock that wall down. That is one of the biggest deterrents to advancing these programs. Everybody gets a bag of fish once in a while. You can't save them all, but it's important that the scientific community understands that there is a buffer and there is an abundance of everything. We're not just going for single species here. Biodiversity is important. They have to be able to appreciate that. The paper VTRs that we are, suffering with and through and from, do nothing to address the issues of biodiversity. And they feel as if you are grading your own ability to fish clean. It's just the wrong message, the wrong assumption, and it produces a poor relationship. So the quicker we can get to a more common understanding of accountability's potential to grow the pie versus its potential to close the fishery, the quicker we will get to a better place. I think Buckmeister Fuller said something about if you want to create a new reality and not have to force people to go there, simply make it a better one than the one they're existing. And so I think that's what we have to do. We have to show the advantages. We have to have common understanding of the science, and hopefully the incentive of reduced cost will be enough to push a lot of guys over the top.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. I mean, I think to me, it starts with helping the fishermen understand how the data that's being collected off the boat is going to be used in the stock assessment. And I guess my starting premise is that all fishermen want a healthy resource to hand off to their kids. And so they're really willing to understand accountability in terms of maintaining a sustainable fishery. I mean, we're proud of what we do out there. You know, it's a great lifestyle, and we'd love to be able to pass it on to future generations. And so you start with that and say, well, this is the kind of information we need to sustainably manage the stock and hand it off to the future generations. Then that starts to get you buy-in. But you have to be really clear on, you know, what is the information needed for that, and what is this information that the fishermen are collecting going to be used for? And, you know, with cameras, there's a real concern that it's going to be like a traffic light camera that catches you doing every little thing wrong, which is not really the purpose of the program. So again, you know, I think there's buy-in for using the data for sustainable fisheries management. I think there's concern if it gets misused for some enforcement purposes, which is not the purpose that the at-sea monitoring program was put together for. And then, as Paul was saying, it kind of comes down to how much precision do you really need to be able to achieve some of those accountability goals? I mean, you know, how close is close enough, knowing that even observers don't give you perfect stuff. I mean, you can make them seasick pretty easy. So I think it's, you know, again, just communication and improving the understanding of how the data will be used.
Again, that goes back to education, and communication. You know, my captains don't want to throw fish back, and they believe in sustainability, but they have that fear of enforcement and getting into trouble because they're being spied on with a camera. So to me, the approach is more important, and that they, like you say, have a buy-in, and they can, their opinion's going to matter. They're part of the solution. So let me see, I'm not sure how to say, but it is all about education. And even in the recreational sector, because I saw and realized that fishermen, both recreational and commercial, point the finger at the scientists. But the more data collected would be beneficial to them. And I learned that in that MREP program, Marine Education Resource Program, that, you know, really the more science that you put out there, the better off for all fishermen on all sides. It's just that they don't know that, and that's education.
Well, if I can talk for just a second, I'll just say, seems like our situation's a little bit different, being that we already have mandatory 100% coverage. So basically the decision being between onboard observers versus EM is, there's obviously the same as like Chris was saying with the basket spread all over. Don't get me started on that. I dream about them in my sleep, tripping over those. But anyway. So yes, on a smaller boat, there's some advantages to having a camera, but it's a cost thing. And what you're seeing here in our fisheries are the margins are so tight that the smaller vessels, which are the ones that harvest a lot of the flatfishes, a lot of the stuff that we don't come anywhere near catching the OY or ACL on, just the costs are too much. It's cost prohibitive. They're off doing something else. They don't want to be in the fishery. They're shrimping, they're crabbing, they're doing whatever else they can, or they've flat out gone away. And what I hope we can get through is get some kind of compromise on, because what we do hear from the council and NIMS and everything is that no, it has to be, you know, perfect or very close to it. And you know, we just need some wiggle room, because, you know, in my opinion, MSA isn't there just to say that, hey, MSA's there to harvest a broad range of fish and catch them too, not having perfect sight. I mean, if you're not running a biological concern, come on, let's get some perspective on some of this stuff, and let's move forward with get some guidance on accuracies that's going to be acceptable to the council on things, or NIMS or whatever. And so that's what I kind of wish we had a little more clarity from them is, hey, if you can make sure we're not going to throw over X, Y, and Z, then you know what? It's going to be okay if we just sample a portion of this and extrapolate it out and call that good, even though it might be high or low. So, you know, that's the kind of the buy off. I think right now, almost everybody would take a camera if it was half the cost, say, or less cost than an observer. Almost everybody would, because you already got the accountability portion. It's already there. The info's already there. So there's less of this hesitation because you don't have a choice. But anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. So it seems like it's a little bit different position than some of the others.
You know, we have talked quite a bit here, or at least a few minutes, kicking the industry around a little bit for their reluctance to want to change. But it's not just us. You know, scientists are made out of the spare basket of donkey parts that fishermen are too. You know, they're just as stubborn as we are. And there is some institutional reluctance to accept the data that is developed via camera. You know, originally we had the throwdown between the pop dine scientists and the energetic scientists, and now it's like a barroom brawl. It's wandered off into the corner, and now you got scientists that are in favor of camera developed data versus, you know, the assessment people that kind of like doing it with the lights off and the door closed. So there is reluctance on both sides, and I think if nothing else, we should be able to rapture around the concept in this pandemic that we need to have a more durable methodology at the disposal of the industry and science, so that data streams are not interrupted by things of this nature ever again. You know, all of the fishermen sitting here just took a hit. We haven't realized what it's going to be, but because of the uncertainty associated with fewer observed trips, radically fewer, the big white boats aren't doing their job. It's going to have to come out of the hatch somehow, as the saying goes, and it will introduce uncertainty into the assessment process. And every fisherman in America just took a hit because we haven't seized this moment to advance the cause of cameras. Congress just got done bundling up all the paper money that they get their hands on, shoving it out the doors and windows of the Congress, and I didn't see any earmark for wholesale camera development in the fisheries up around, you know, east and west coast. I think we should have grabbed a few bundles of it and earmarked it for that. Hopefully this is the last pandemic we have in my lifetime. But in general, we're not going to be able to support the fleet with adequate observers anyway going forward. It's a rotten job. The average observer sticks around about 2 years, if they're lucky. So I just think there are reasons, evolutionary forces at play that we haven't succumbed to, and we should be more willing to on both sides.
Let me hop in with another question from the audience here. This person asks, I'm curious if the panelists see a potentially facilitatory role at the federal level to help set standards for EM, to augment or amplify or unify the work happening at the regional level? Or do EM programs seem to need so much customization per fishery, region, boat type, that it makes more sense to have everyone around EM more fully focused at the council level? Anybody want to run at that one? I think, Dan, you already sort of approached it, but feel free.
Yeah, okay, I'll take a stab at it. I think it really needs to stay at the regional level. I think the regional level knows what's going to work best with their fleet. They know the dynamics on the boats the best. They have a good process with the councils. Hopefully there's a good working process there. And if the councils can provide those advisory panels that we've talked about that really focus on EM, I think that's the appropriate scale. I mean, just looking around the country, I know that recently the agency tried to put out some national standards on data retention and cost sharing. And those are really controversial and causing a lot of problems at the regional levels because we all are so slightly different. I mean, our program is based on a fee applied to all the boats that people pay, and then the government collects that and then contracts it back out to some provider. And that's got to cover the equipment and everything else on the boats. It's not like the fishermen are buying their own systems yet on that. And so I think each place is so, should have the full flexibility. And the last thing I would ever want is to have, NIMS-DC starting to dictate what should be working on the back deck of my boat. Is that clear?
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, you bet. I've got another one here if anyone wants to take a swing at it. Have you found unexpected uses for your EM data that you did not originally anticipate?
I'll take a little bit of a stab at that. I have drawn attention to species outside the purview of the New England Council to other councils. I'm a little bit disappointed, but well, in our region, we catch species of the Mid-Atlantic Council under their purview and jurisdiction, as well as our own. And I've been a little disappointed that they haven't been more willing participants to evolve towards this opportunity. Any data that you get that someone else is paying for is a pretty good deal. And there's nothing more expensive than data that you generate and never use. So we have to be able to share this data gracefully for our common good. And the state of Rhode Island has expressed a lot of interest in reviewing our data and seeing what we have to offer. And that's a way for it to find its way into the Atlantic States arena, Fisheries Commission. And so we're only limited by our own creativity and cooperative instincts when it comes to the data we are creating. It's always, anytime you can beat back into the box the anecdotal thing that we've been throttled with since I was a kid, you have to take it. You have to take that opportunity. This stuff can do a lot of good if we approach it with a positive attitude as fishermen and find receptive scientists willing to interpret it on the, upon the return to land. I think we're just scratching the surface.
So we've tried a couple of interesting things. I'll take a stab at that. I mean, I think if I can, most fishermen like having that deck view on most of the time. It's pretty easy to watch how the crew are getting things ready and see what's going on. And, you don't have to keep running back and forth and sticking your head out on deck. You can see what's going on. And so that's, one of the benefits of having a camera system on the boat. And they're not always in record mode. They're just on our boats. They only start recording when you start hauling. So you can have an unrecorded view of the deck going all the time, which is kind of helpful. But in terms of the data itself, we did, NIFWIT helped us fund a small pilot project where, our fisheries are demersal long lines. So we set our gear across the bottom. And, there's a lot you can learn about catch and bycatch if you know bottom structures really well. I mean, the fish use those bottom structures the same way deer use the woods and the trees and the ravines and the mountains and everything. I mean, they really move around on that. And so if you think about it, an EM system on a fixed gear boat counts where every fish is as it comes up. And then it also records the lat and long of the boat when that fish comes over the rail. So you have this basically the logbook of your set that tells you what every single fish was. And what we did was we found one of our members who's a computer programmer wrote a Python algorithm to take the start and end points of the set when you set them, and then go back and look at the start and end points of the haul and align those two so it goes back there. And then he just basically binned the catch every 1/10 of a mile along that line, and you could get a count of how many black cod you had, how many rockfish you had, how many skates or bycatch, and it was really easy to just display that visual logbook on what end of the set was really catching the best fish. And then alpha members themselves have been collecting bathymetric data, and so we have some really high resolution bathy charts, and you could plot that right over these bathy charts to see what are the bottom structures on the ocean that were really leading to good catch, bad catch or bycatch. And you can give that back to the boats, and they pretty much got a visual logbook. So if you go away for a couple of years and you come back to this stretch of the coast and said, oh yeah, I had really good fishing here. How did I set in my gear back then? You pull this up and there's your catch per unit effort right across every little nook and cranny on the bottom. And that can be really helpful. But we kind of ran into problems with that because our program, they randomly select a certain number of hauls to review. So you don't have a complete trip's worth of data. But something like that, where they're using some of this automated fish identification technology, it'd be great to partner with them on that. I mean, we don't need to know every single species of rockfish. It's pretty much flatfish, redfish, blackfish, or other is enough to give the fishermen a lot of utility out of the data that they're bringing up. If they could do that automatically in almost real time, I think that would be a huge benefit to the boats.
That is a great story about the bathymetrics. I love that. We should do an article about that for Ian for Fish sometime, Dan. Share it with the rest of the
More
world.
work, sounds good.
Yeah. Here's one. Let's see here. This person asks, I'd be curious to hear some more details surrounding why the regulated program is working for Alaska fishermen, but the incentives of EM aren't yet clear in other regions. Is that largely driven by the specifics of how the EM working group has constrained the amount of work for the program? That's the Chevy versus Porsche analogy that brings the cost clearly below human observer, or are there other nuances there for what the incentives are? Anybody? That's a pretty big question, but.
So if they're referencing the Alaska program, go ahead.
On the East Coast, up until recently, we have had all but 1 year, all of the costs of monitoring our catch paid for. So there was no particular incentive to change. Unfortunately, discarding fish and not reporting it has been a part of the culture. And until there are significant costs associated with bad behavior, then it won't change. But the government has been paying, so people have not been changing. We jumped into the program because we could see the end of those days were upon us, and hopefully we get the fleet to switch over, and we'll be in a whole lot better place.
Well, so I think part of it is the nature of the individual fisheries too, because some of them just lend themselves to electronic monitoring a lot easier than others, ours being one of the worst, I guess. As far as, it's like similar to Chris's, except starting to sort everything out by species, all these little tiny slender soles and little, we're talking few inches long, 8 inches long maybe, that by the time, if we're going to have to sort all those out, run them over a thing or into baskets or whatever, then it ends up being just, I'm just going to have to pay somebody. So I think, and the technology is not there yet, or at least it hasn't been tested to the point where it's anybody can really sign off on it yet. So part of it's just some fisheries are just harder to do than others, and Unfortunately, I think that's a big reason for us on the West Coast from the trawl, bottom trawl part.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you know, we're asking an awful lot of these systems, and we're asking a lot of the science to be able to absorb it all. If we focus on simply putting cameras on vessels, running them all the time, sampling 20-25% of their, you know, reported catch and discards, and validating, you know, the logbook reporting or the paper recording, whatever it is, just validate the you know, the trip reports, and let the evolution of these things gracefully take its own path. Things will be made available to us over the course of time that we are not even able to dream of right now. So I think if we can just look at the socioeconomic data in the different regions, figure out what benefits a fisherman, what cost level they can afford. You know, recently we discovered that on the East Coast, the socioeconomic data suggested that our profit margins were infinitely higher than they are. So it blows the budget on day one. I have it on good authority that there's not a whole lot of fishermen that are just raking in money hand over fist. That can, you know, you make a living, you work hard, but at the end of the day, technological advances cannot put you out of business. They cannot deprive you of a profit margin. They cannot deprive you of the ability to responsibly maintain your vessel or afford insurance or replace your gear or pay a good living wage so that you can compete with other businesses for young and bright people. There are a lot of sacrifices that you have to make just to be a fisherman. And foregoing profitability on a $500,000, $1 million, or $2 million or $5 million investment is not one that we should be asked to do. Reasonable expectations need to go on, you know, be the sideboards of this program. I agree with sharing some costs, absolutely. But I don't want to, you know, be the guy that has to pay for someone who has operated as if he lived in a forest of money trees his whole life. And so I think we have to, as an industry, kind of wrap our minds around what the goals ought to be and try to uniformly get them put in play in our various regions. You know, we're all here about accountability. We're all here about trying to preserve the fishery. We're all here trying to inform science in a better manner. But you can't go out of business doing it. And some of the storage ideas that I have had have been just far-fetched, unreasonable. You know, validate the VTR, then you hang on to it. Want to keep a whole movie of it? Do it on your own nickel. I'm all set. If I'm half the recidivist you think I am, catch me next time. I'm liable to break the law again. I haven't broke the law in 40 years. So I guess we got to just, in order to speed this up, we're going to have to slow it down a little bit, because some of the things I hear spoken of in the West Coast just aren't going to fly where we are. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Chris. Here's another one that just came in. Do you think, and I think you're already getting at this, but the question is, do you think it's better for the agency to define data needs and let industry choose how best to meet them? Observers, EM, other. Would this lead to more innovation?
You know, harvesting data for profit is not something out of the realm of possibility. I'm glad they brought it up. I wouldn't mind taking some otoliths. I wouldn't mind taking a few scales. It's not rocket science. No one said anything about working on rockets, working on fish. So, you know, we might be able to save enough money by making enough money. You know, I don't have to just harvest fish. I can harvest data. Take a little time to do that. That's fine. So we're willing on our, on our end. Platforms for profitability. Doesn't matter if we're feeding you or filling your head. It's all good.
That probably gets at that probably answers this other question, which was multiple people have talked about making sure EM benefits the fishermen. What are some benefits you think are possible that may not currently be leveraged? And monetizing data is certainly one of them, however you can get at that. Here's another.
Actually, I would go back to that really quick, Scott, just to pick up on the point of the let the agency say what the needs are and let the industry figure out how to meet them. I think that's a fair point, but that's what led us to hearing that the needs are a Porsche, and we were able to build a Chevy. And so before you go down that road, there has to be a really clear-eyed discussion in partnership with industry about what are needs and what are wants. And once you really distill it down to what are the needs that you both can agree is the critical information to provide, then let industry figure out how to do it. But if you just let the agency dictate, what they really want, that can be hard to meet.
That won't be successful either. It won't be a successful partnering if there's no collaboration with the fishermen and the scientists working together to make it work. That's why it's so important. There should be some kind of a benefit to the fishermen, and it's a lot with education. Certainly, they could consider maybe a pilot program and giving the cameras for free, putting them on there and having a pilot program to see what works before you just instill a program that's not going to be successful if there's no input from all sides.
Yeah, and going back to the earlier question about how do you get buy-in, I think that really plays right into that. I mean, cost is one buy-in, but then the other is, the reason people are putting EM systems on their boats in Alaska, and it's a voluntary program, is because what Chris said, it's easier to have a camera overhead than an observer underfoot. I mean, you don't, as long as you can structure your EM program on the deck, that the boat can continue focusing on efficiently catching fish. That's what we're out there to do. We're not out there to try and be a scientific platform. We're out there to catch fish. And so we're all willing to provide the monitoring that's needed to support sustainable fisheries, but we need to be able to run our boats efficiently. And so designing the program so it works for the back deck of the boat is just critical. And then taking really hard looks at that. One example of that in Alaska, again, I think everybody knows the Canadian program for halibut is based on a logbook audit, right? So the fishermen in Canada are required to keep track of, I think it's one of 11 species or something like that. And then they fill out their logbook, and then the camera footage is reviewed on 10% of their hauls to make sure the logbook works, and that's fine. Well, in Alaska, we just kind of took a look at that and said, well, it's pretty much the same thing. If they're reviewing the footage and counting every single fish on a haul, what do you need a logbook for? Why are you making the fishermen take that extra step to fill out a logbook, which introduces potentially more error, and it's one more thing of work for the fishermen? I mean, the Canadian guys basically have an abacus on the back deck. They're trying to keep track of all the fish. And so why make them do that if you're going to look at the footage anyway? And we found that, you could just review the footage straight and use that as an estimate for catch accounting. So it's just really looking at, what is the data needs and what is the most operationally compatible way that the boat can help meet those needs, I think is real important.
Thank you, Dan. We're getting close to the end of this webinar, but I think we might have time for one real quick go around here. And maybe this one with an eye towards other fishermen in other areas who are thinking about EM. What have you learned, maybe just real quick, short answers, what have you learned about EM that you wish you'd known when you started?
Wow. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a slam dunk. We make as much noise as we can, but we need to get to critical mass. Critical mass will speak more voluminously than individuals, Ken, who are dedicated to a project a whole lot. There's only might be a dozen guys in New England, 150 boats, maybe a dozen guys with cameras. We're not at critical mass yet. You know, I wish it was more of a concerted effort that was more dedicated to understanding change, because that's really what NOAA is trying to do. They're trying to orchestrate significant cultural change in a region that is fundamentally at times averse to it in a difficult climate. So I guess I hadn't contemplated the depth of all the components that would bring this together. I thought if we jumped on it and got going and made it look easy, it would catch on. But change is a complicated process. It's a function of education, and there has to be trust. The fact that this was rolled out as they were rolling Carlos away in bracelets made it seem as if it was a ham-handed enforcement tool as opposed to a scientific endeavor. No one really debated it. So change is complicated, and I wish I just understood more of it when I jumped in.
I'm gonna throw in a plug. Maybe NOAA could help fund Mote Marine as a pilot program, because Mote Marine really does want to hear what the fishermen have to say. And it's a confidential, it's voluntary, but they always need more boats to volunteer. But they engage the fishermen, and I think that's what makes it a positive experience for me. You know, to me, no wonder the fishermen might think it's a regulatory tool or enforcement tool coming from NOAA. But you know, I think it just all boils down on the approach, how it's approached, communication and education, and that's, you know, getting the buy-in from the fishermen, allowing them to come up with the ideas and solutions. You know, it's not just forced on them, or it's not going to be a positive experience.
Thanks, Lisa. We're just about out of time, so I better start to wrap this up. Really appreciate all of you taking part in this, and so valuable, I know, for so many of our attendees. We hope you found this conversation interesting and useful. If we didn't get to your question, or if you'd like to speak directly with any of our guests, they're happy to do so. So please feel free to contact them at the email addresses that are going to appear here on the screen. And I mean that, and they do too. EM for Fish is all about connecting people who share these common interests and goals. Also, don't hesitate to contact me anytime at scott@em4.fish or through the contact form on our website. We welcome your feedback on this discussion, as well as suggestions for future conversations that we might help to pull together. Panelists, any closing remarks or thoughts?
Well, I hope that we might all make it on an advisory panel and we'll see each other.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again to all of you. And thank you to everyone who took part in this and everyone who tuned in today. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks for pulling this together, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks,
And-
guys.